everybody. How you doing? Thank you so much for coming out. The Programmers Lab's back after about a year hiatus since we've done one of these. We are back, and I am incredibly grateful to our group of panelists and to RST Vision for supporting open source here. So thanks for coming out today. I'd like to take a moment to introduce Adam. Adam Munoz is, what are you?
I'm
the owner.
Munoz. Yeah, family Visions and Color and Premiere is a family-owned business. So my dad's the owner. My sister Taylor and I help run the company, and we're just excited for you guys to all be here and kind of get this up and running.
What in God's name ever made you guys think to let us use your as your clubhouse?
No, you guys you've been great. So we're happy to have everybody here and kind of bring the industry and bring some knowledge to the industry.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us. I'll walk you out. I appreciate that. And we're going to get started with the program. All right. How's it going, Zoom world? So I will admit that one of the things that's been most challenging about today is we are incorporating a hybrid event. So in addition to the folks in the room, who I'm incredibly grateful that you took the long, in Dylan's case, drive out here. Thank you for showing up. There are a group of people online that are also here. We can't see them, but we can see one of them on our screen. That's Mr. Matt Corke, who's zooming in from New York City. We are also going to record this and figure out, we're happy to give it to anybody who wants it. It's free, open source for everyone. But Zoom is easy. Like, we did this on Zoom during the pandemic a lot. Yep. And prior to that, we did this in person a lot. And I think in person's easy. I think Zoom is easy. Hybrid is not the easiest thing in the world. And we figured out our audio problems with an amazing amount of support from Jason Clary, from Nick in the back, and from Blaze. So to the team, there is a real group of people who are working on making this work, and I'm incredibly grateful. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so welcome to the Programmers Lab on Mbox. I'd just like to take a moment to introduce our panelists. First, we have Mr. Zac Cromwell, and I have a bio here, so please bear with me. Zac's a lighting director and media server programmer that's been in the industry for over 20 years, working in concert, touring, live television, corporate events, as well as motion pictures. Zac has been involved with the concept of using video to light for camera since 2013. He was on the House of Cards team to use Mbox and video walls for a more interactive look during driving scenes, bringing David Fincher's ideas to reality. A few shows Zac is currently or has been on are the Mbox programmer for Penn and Teller, Fool Us, Jimmy Kimmel live concert series, Grammy's premieres, American Music Awards, Florida Georgia Line, and Paula Abdul. A few projects using Mbox for interactive lighting include All Eyes on Me, the Tupac movie, The Baker and the Beauty, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, that was me about 15 minutes ago, and Lethal Weapon, Unbelievable, and of course, House of Cards. Welcome, Zac Cromwell.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Matt Corke, who is on video from New York City. Matt is the project manager for PRG's line of Mbox Media Server and media playback products. This involves wearing many different hats on a day-to-day basis: product roadmaps, software development, customer support, and documentation training. Matt didn't start out with the goal of project manager in mind, but through various stages of career development over the last 28 years has found his place. Matt has been the project manager for Mbox for over 15 years, starting when the original Mbox software made the jump to being Mbox Extreme, and through all the changes from OS X to Mac OS, and now from Intel to Apple Silicon. During this time, he has worked with too many clients to count, but some of the highlights have been Lestat on Broadway, Lady Gaga, U2, Dancing with the Stars, Oblivion, which I loved, and Plan B, and of course, all those immersive Van Gogh exhibits. Thank you for coming.
Can I also add?
Oh, please.
Can I also add that he is sometimes our therapist?
So when you guys are having trouble out there in the Serengeti, you give Matt a call?
Yeah, I get that.
And he's on East Coast time? He must love that.
Yeah. he's been great.
Awesome. Next, we have Mr. James Worman. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you. Do you like Jim or James?
James.
All right. James T. Kirk. James Worman has been a member of Local 728 for almost 10 years. He has worked on numerous live shows and game shows that utilize Mbox in implementation of lighting design. He uses Mbox while programming at Jimmy Kimmel Live to drive content on video walls into pixel map fixtures in the lighting rig. Prior to joining 728, James worked for PRG for 5 years, where he was the Los Angeles Mbox product specialist. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Mr. Ben Dynice. Hi, Ben.
Hello.
Ben is a Hog4 lighting programmer who got in the union in 2008. He started in episodic TV and then went into commercials and features. He's programmed many feature films, including reshoots. You tried to get me there, didn't you? Ben started at Quasar Science in 2017 as the CTO or Chief Technical Officer for Quasar Science. Was there for 7 years. He has worked with Mbox on LED walls and image-based lighting with Quasar Science for virtual production research, and is now moved on as the Director of Production for UX UI, which I believe means user experience and user interface for Aperture Lighting. Most importantly, his highest credit, he is the father of 2 boys and a soccer coach. Thank you for coming out. So the Programmers Lab is a panel discussion where we have sort of a salon of ideas. We have a lot of time on our hands right now, but even when we don't, we try to meet at least once a month where we'll bring a new topic each month and we will have a conversation. The schedule today will be a 30 to 60 minute presentation conversation, followed by Q&A from both the room and, if we are technologically lucky, also from the internet. And then we will take a short break and we will hang out, have some refreshments, place pop Portos in the room. So we'll have some Portos and we will get together and do what's probably the most important thing. We'll hang out and network and see where our next job is coming from. So I'm incredibly grateful that you joined us at Open Source. Thank you very much for being here today. Let's get right to it. I'd like to start with Matt. And it's weird because you're behind me, but I'm going to look at you in the camera. Matt, you've been around this for a long time. Could you give us a little bit of the birth of Mbox, the history and the arc of how Mbox has come to its current state so we could just sort of see where we came from?
Sure. I could probably give you too much information.
Well, don't be afraid to edit.
I gotta kind of take the headset off because there's a delay on the audio. So, Mbox started before I was involved. It was the genesis of an idea to make a moving light that could actually have moving gobos. Yeah, sorry, the audio is a little wacky. So the folks at a company called LSD made a light called Icon, and they made a version called Icon M that had a little DMD device. Where the mirror would be normally, or where the reflector would be kind of. And so the lamp bounced off this DMD device and then back through the optical train of the fixture, and it made little moving patterns. So it's basically pixelated gobos. And as part of that development, they made 50-something fixtures, and they were never particularly bright. The DMD was about at most an inch square. And they're trying to bounce 1200 watts of arc lamp off of it. And the thing would melt if you tried to get any brighter. So they gave up. They threw up their hands and said, we can't make this any better. What else can we do? And the 2 guys involved at the time, or the 2 main guys involved at the time, thought, well, why don't we make a computer that can play back video, or these patterns at least, and then we'll output that through a projector, because at that point they could have the moving lights, they could have the projector, and the really big projector at that point in time was brighter than the moving light could be. And they knew they could figure out how to put that into some sort of Anatolian. And the idea just kind of developed from there. They went from let's do black and white gobos to let's play some sort of movie, let's make it a color movie, let's play a QuickTime movie, something that you can load onto the computer. And that was kind of the birth of Mbox. I can't tell you whether it was the first media server that was invented. There were other products that came up around the same time, Catalyst, I think Archaeos as well, and probably 2 or 3 other products that I'm not aware of. It was certainly the first media server that I became aware of, because PRG sort of merged with LSD at some point, I think around 1999. And the folks there came and showed us the product, and I got interested in the product at that point in time, even though I wasn't doing product development, I wasn't doing anything with R&D. Moved forward about 5 years from there, and PRG had also acquired VLPS, and VLPS had a media server called EX1, which was PC-based. And somebody had the brilliant idea after we went to a trade show and showed both products, Mbox on one side of the trade booth, EX1 on the other side of the trade booth. And somebody had the brilliant idea and said, why don't we take the two things and merge them together? And that's where Mbox Extreme came to be. And that was roughly when I started being sort of the product manager for the product.
What year was that?
And it's just, sorry.
What year was that, Matt?
2004, I think.
Excellent.
And it's gone through several iterations since then. Mbox Extreme versions, sort of 1, 2, and then 3, I guess. And then we stopped calling it Mbox Extreme. And it's now Mbox up to version 4. And at the moment, we're working on version 5.
When did you first hear about it, Matt? Oh, Matt. Sorry, buddy.
My first experience with this line was I was on tour with Fleetwood Mac, and we used the EX1, and I was the tech for the EX1. So I was a tech early on with EX1, which was the other product that Mbox merged with. And then I started programming with Mbox probably 2006, 2007. I really started as a programmer intending to do more media servers than lighting. But yeah, I kind of was involved a little early.
But it's taken off.
It's taken off, yeah. It's been a great career for me.
Wonderful. Excellent. Well, we are particularly interested here in the Programmers Lab of how this technology has made its way into film sets. Ben, I'd like to throw it over to you to talk about your experience and history with Mbox and how you've seen that sort of gravitate maybe away from, not away from concert, but grow from the concert or the live world into our world in film and television.
Sure. Yeah. In film and television, I really got into using Mbox and pixel mapping lighting when we were talking about interactive lighting to use on set. Most recently, that's become very interesting in the virtual production world of things with a concept we call image-based lighting, where we're trying to take the virtual world that surrounds our talent and project that onto our talent to get them to be more believable in the space for the story that we're trying to tell. So that really came in to happen for me on some different movies and projects, and with the research I was doing with Quasar Science into image-based lighting. And the reason I started bugging Matt about all this is we were doing 150 universes of SACN data to try and get the image-based lighting, where a lot of the consoles and other platforms, they simply could not handle that type of massive media push, right? Because you can ingest in your RGB data from Mbox into your console, but the consoles really can't handle that much constant RGB data flowing out of it. So that's how I got involved with it. And, bringing it on to working on movies and commercials and things like that. We were always pixel mapping either from the Hog console for me specifically, or, with Catalyst and Hippo and different things. But for me, it was really Mbox that kind of took off and really had all the tools to be able to properly do that on a given film set.
Wonderful. So James, I want to key in on you run Kimmel, right?
Yeah, I'm one of 2 programmers.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your console on there?
We use a 676.
Okay, Vert guy.
Yeah, Vert.
Wonderful. You obviously have screens. Are you controlling both the screens and the live lighting content as well?
Yeah, for music we do screens and all the lighting rigs.
So talk a little bit about how you're dealing with an Mbox, a console, a screen, a lighting rig, and how those two things kind of flow together or don't flow together. What's your experience like that?
I mean, it goes hand in hand. Like whatever color you want to use in your lighting rig, you use in your screens. Like
Okay.
It's kind of another fixture in my lighting rig, essentially.
Got it.
Yeah, as a creative, working with lighting and video at the same time, it sometimes makes it easier because you're not conflicting with the video. You're not have to constantly go into the video channel. Hey, what color is your next act? And that sort of
Yeah,
thing. When
it's
you
easier.
have that control, It's easier. You do have more to deal with, but you kind of have to tone it down and think of it just as another lighting fixture, and each Mbox is just one fixture. You can't think of it as.
So you don't think of the separate screens as a fixture, but rather the inbox as
The
a
inbox
fixture?
itself.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's part of, it's part of the rig. It goes with my lighting ideas. You know, if I have purple in the rig, do I want purple in the background? Do I want a contrasting color to go with that? And what vibe goes with the music of content type thing? Or
Does it make your workflow easier, obviously, or possible?
some days it doesn't.
Yeah.
Oh, tell me about one of those days. I want to hear about, I'm sorry, Matt, but I want to hear about some of the hard parts.
Okay.
I mean, there are hard parts. I mean, it can get very hard to work with artists that want a specific look in the
No.
screens, and you're like, that doesn't go with what I want the color of the song to be. Yeah, I mean, it's or hey, we don't like that flowy content you put on there. Do you have more stars? And you're like, why do you want stars for the song? Okay,
Yeah.
here you go.
Okay.
Yeah, or also the technical side of dealing with the artist. You know, you've got tours coming in at Kimmel, and they're sending us content from their tour, but then we've got to reformat it and everything. And you know, I do media servers, but I'm really a lighting guy. I don't know a lot about video and the creation of the content. I've learned definitely over the last 10 years of dealing with Mbox. Like I've been put in the hot seat enough where you have to learn certain things. But there's times where it's just really difficult to come across that technical hurdle of dealing with an artist piece of content and making it work within the Mac ecosystem, which is sometimes the toughest part of dealing with Mboxes. I'm sure Matt can attest.
Matt, I'm curious, and I'm relatively uninitiated. Was there a choice to go Mac only a long time ago? Was that a technological reason? Well, I mean, how did it come about that we can only have Mac?
At the time, the guys who were developing the product were Mac developers. The products that came out of LSD were Macintosh based, and in fact, they had a lighting console which somebody had bought or cracked open a Macintosh computer, taken the CPU board out of it, and installed that into the lighting console. So that's what they were familiar with. That's what they do. And as I mentioned earlier, and what Zach said, the EX1 was PC based. There were certain advantages to both platforms, but it seemed at the time when we made the merge that the advantages lay more on the side of Macintosh. The senior developer who stayed with the product was the Macintosh developer. The guy who had written the majority of the EX1 software had left the company at that point. And so it made sense to stick with the Macintosh platform. We have investigated a few times over the last 15 years, either a conversion to PC or making a PC version as well. The problem we have is that that task is so monumental, and the resources that we have are not great enough to take that task on without basically dropping developments of the rest of the product for some period of time that could be like 2 years on estimate. Unless PRG is willing to pay for, another 2 or 3 developers, which is not something that we have the luxury of.
Well, we're going to struggle on with what we have, and it's wonderful. I am a Mac guy myself, but it's interesting to hear that there could be a potential future PC thing. I'm not advocating for PC.
Yeah. I mean, I've asked for it in the past. I've had that conversation with him. Because Matt's been great about listening to the user base. So I reached out to him, and I understand why we haven't gone there. I did ask at a time where they were like, "Oh yeah, we may be doing it," but I understand why we didn't, or why they didn't go that way and everything. But depending on the ecosystem that you like to work in, like I'm personally a Mac guy on my personal computing and everything, it does just kind of make it easy that I put my laptop in and get my email, right? I email piece of content, and I have remote on my laptop, which is plugged into my whole Mac system, and it's all sitting right there.
Yep. Just works.
Yep, it just kind of works for me.
All right, I have a list of questions here to ask. I'm going to take a moment to hear, is there any, from our audience here live, is there any burning desire of a subject you would like, you came here wanting to talk about? I can't promise we're going to talk about it, but I'd love to hear if anybody has something they'd really like to hear about. Because I have an idea if you don't. Okay, so you said just a moment ago, I'm a lighting guy, all this video stuff, the signals, the RG, the color spaces, you know, obviously you've learned a lot about video formats. I'm going to encourage you or Ben, who I know both have a breadth of knowledge, to talk about color space. I have heard, and this is not, the truth is I don't know well enough if it's correct, but I've heard that different media servers may affect the final output of the color space in post in a positive or negative way. Can you talk a little bit about the color space and how Mbox interacts with the color space? Is that an appropriate topic?
Sure. I mean,
Maybe define the color space for us. Put you really on the spot.
not sure if I can actually come up with a solid definition on the color space, but in dealing with color space and different media servers, I'm not sure if different media servers give different color spaces. I've never really, I do program different media servers, but Mbox is my preferred, and I've never seen a difference. It really is like when you're dealing with image-based lighting, which I've done quite a bit of. But every media server you can add a LUT to, just like you can add a LUT to camera.
Which is a lookup table.
Lookup table. Yep.
Basically,
And that was something, you know, that was another thing. I was in the hot seat. I had no clue what a LUT was. And somebody came and said, can we give you a LUT and put it on there? And I gave Matt a call and he had to talk me through how putting a LUT.
which, if I'm correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a lookup table or a LUT allows us to sort of define what our color space and what our RGB values and frequencies are. Is that an accurate statement that I just made?
Yeah, I mean, when you're there's a couple things dealing with color space. So most video files that you're going to play with are going to be already in Rec 709. And the thing that you have to be aware of is what are the lights, what is the RGB color space that the lights are going to process that at, right? Because if you, Rec 709 fully saturated red is not the fully saturated red that we're used to on all the lights, right? So you have to make sure that the light that you're using can be set to a different color space to interpret that RGB data that Mbox will be sending to you. So you either have to have the light be able to change the color space, you have to modify the footage, actually color grade the footage, which you can apply a LUT to, or you can actually retranscode the footage if it's not in the right color space. These are all kind of problems you have to deal with, depends on where your media is coming from. Especially, I'm more speaking on the image-based lighting side as opposed to the screens and TV side, because a lot of times if you just straight pixel map a video file and you'll be like, that doesn't look right. Well, because the light is saying when I get full red, I'm going to use the full red that I have the capability of, but the media is saying you need to be in Rec 709 red. So you have to kind of understand the differences there to be able to get the right output from the light. That's why traditionally RGB profiles that manufacturers have done, they're just in the most the highest level of red, green, or blue that the manufacturer can produce. But that's not how the video footage is interpolated. So you have to make sure that everything's speaking kind of the same language so you get the right results. That's why when you for the past 10 years, just straight pixel mapping, you always have to sit and adjust. And you're like, why doesn't this look right? Why do I have too much detail in the black, right? That's another big problem. Like if your gamma is not set low enough, you'll see a lot of noise in your video file. And that's because Rec 709 kind of has a low pass filter that applies to that to get rid of that. So if you see pixel mapped video footage and you're seeing a lot of extra noise, it's either in the wrong color space or the light can't respond to that color space.
Excellent answer. And it leads me to a very simple question. I want to talk about video or versus pixel mapping, where was a period in time where we just pixel mapped in the console. That seems to be the past. I don't know if that's the past, but it feels like we're moving much towards having a media server component in our rigs. Open the can of worms and talk about that. Yeah. Pixel mapping versus media servers.
Man,
video.
That's an interesting one. mine and James' world. Because both of us come from 676, which is a PRG console, and it has Mbox built in. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's probably the best pixel mapper in a console. And I know I'm biased here, and people are gonna get all mad about it, but I mean, every other major console, they don't have a true pixel mapper. It's a bit mapper. So in 676, we've been lucky enough to have Mbox built in. Matt's been great about being able to integrate that and everything. But so I've been lucky and haven't needed to use Mbox pixel map. And I've been doing more. I use Mbox more for just video.
Okay, so does that mean that you'll use the native hog or the native bird or the native MA pixel mapping engine at the same time you're sending video to screens, or will you just take one of those out of your workflow? And anybody else, feel free to hear how you work. It probably has something to do with the console you're using.
Yeah, I mean, if it's
Yeah.
676, I put the same content into the console as I do the server that I'm going to use, so I can integrate the two together. But other consoles moving forward, because I am pushing past 676 and getting into MA and EOS. So moving forward with those, I'll probably use Mbox exclusively.
Okay.
Because I don't like the way they pixel map.
This is actually a great question for Mr. John Crimmins in the back there.
Johnny,
What's
up, brother?
When do you use the built-in pixel mapping engine?
come on down here, John.
Versus when do you bring in Mbox?
Come sit in my chair. Come up here.
As you mentioned earlier, especially the high, I run a row high, it gets bogged down with pipe patches 1,004 pixel items. Forget it. I'm like, take a group, get that group, I'm waiting 3 seconds for the end of the programmer. So then I just immediately pivot. And Mbox is always there. I mean, I always have to make it.
So what you're saying, I don't know if the others can hear.
Yeah, come on up here so we hear that. I'm going to give you this chair right here. You're now in the show. Stand right here by my computer.
Hey, buddy.
Good to see you. Everybody, for those of you who didn't get the bio, Mr. John Crimmins, say John. Come on, sit down.
Guest host.
John Crimmins is a local 728 lighting programmer on the HOG system and has been doing commercials and music video or commercials,
Yeah.
movies, music videos for 20 years.
Yeah, I did features for 15 and then commercials now for 15. And much prefer commercials and music video in short form. And just came off a 6-day Mbox job, biggest job I've had with Mbox, and I have so many questions for you guys. In some areas of the platform. Yeah.
But the question that I don't think the audience could hear is when do you use the built-in pixel mapper versus when are you going to?
If I have more than 500 pixels to deal with, the hog just doesn't want to do that in an efficient way. And, hey buddy, and if I need to take video input from, say, so this happens a lot now. Go to an XR stage, one of these rent to stages where they like to call them volume. Normally they're half a volume or a quarter of a volume. And they're driving their screens with whatever they use. I ask for them to split me the SDI video in so that I can mimic what they're doing on our rig that we add to theirs. Hog can't do that, period. You just can't take video in. So it's very limited. If it's, if I have 2 or 3 S360s, yeah, I'll use the inbuilt. It's great. It's fast. It's quick. But anything of size, I pivot to the Mbox. And it's just, it's of all, I've run like 4 media servers. It's the best. It's just the best.
Very user friendly.
Yes.
Super user friendly.
So I'm going to hover over your shoulder now
Yes.
when I ask questions.
Okay.
So speaking of something you just said, let's talk about video input.
So
Can any consoles take video input? Do we always need an Mbox? Are we
Yeah.
limited? Can you talk a little bit about video input either into console or into media server with a bias on console?
I have asked for video input onto 676 and has been, denied like right away. So I don't ever see a console taking a video input because at that point you really should just use a server.
It goes back to the multifunction printer standpoint. Like, if it could do everything, it can't do anything particularly well. So, I mean, like for the tools in my arsenal, it's like you have your specialized tool that are specialized for the job. And I think that if you start to branch out from consoles that are great at controlling lighting and great at doing pixel mapping, and then you have, bring in the video element, I think it starts to get muddled. And what are you really focusing on?
Yeah, it's also the processing power that each
Yeah.
console
Oh, yeah.
needs to do console power and video input, like.
And not every job in the feature and commercial world is video input, so it just, if you have the right tool for the job, I think really helps out.
Yeah, I've done video input more like in rock and roll type stuff, trying to like overlay effects on cameras, that type of stuff. Or trying to get feeds like for live, like the live world or award shows. You're getting input from the truck, so you'll get whatever the package is, award show or the award packages, that type of stuff. Sometimes you'll get the video input. So yeah, I don't ever see a console doing that.
Okay.
That's more of a media server specific job. You don't get a sound console that can do lighting too.
So you won't be able to see all of this on camera. We have about 20 folks in the room in addition to our panelists. By a show of hands, how many people bring a media server with them whenever they roll out their console? So about 5 to 10%, maybe. How about half the time? Same number.
I mean, here's a
So we're
question.
not rolling out media server every time we roll.
I mean, here's a different question. How many times do you roll out a media server without a console? Like, who does that?
Like never.
Never, right? I have moved to, if I'm not doing lighting as well, I kind of prefer to use I prefer to use Director now. I've moved in that direction, where I do prefer to use Director when I'm doing video only. I don't have to control any lights, because when you're looking at it, your screen, everything's right there. When you're looking at a lighting console, there are so many different functions that a media server can do that you're constantly paging through all your different, colors. There's like 7 different pages of color on an MA for Mbox.
Very presets and
Yeah.
macros.
So with Director, it's all built in right there. There's very little paging around, and it's very visual. You can see what's going on. Yeah, John.
So what is Director?
Director is is Mbox's
Standalone GUI essentially.
native control software. Is that what you would say?
It is the software to act instead of a lighting console. If you either not want to use a lighting console, or you don't know how to use a lighting console. I've always been very adamant that
That's me.
the more complicated tool in that rig is the lighting console compared to Mbox. Now, that ignores all the media formatting and the color spaces and stuff like that. But after you learn how to use the lighting console well, it's much, much harder than learning how to program Mbox or get it places.
I think this is a good time to shift the dialogue. I see a hand raised in the back.
We have a chat question.
Oh.
Can we touch on the use of NGI over SPIV?
We can absolutely do that, but we're going to push for a moment till we get to the question and answer session. I want to take this moment to shift away from the conceptual beginnings of Mbox and the theoretical or philosophical bonuses of it, and go to a little bit more. Okay, I'm on set. I got the gaffers kind of barking at me, or I'm about to get ready for this show. What do I need to build out? So I would like to start with talking about the hardware requirements of Mbox. Maybe, again, you did cover it a little bit, but the difference between Director and console, and maybe very much like, okay, I'm gearing up to go out on a commercial in a simple way. What do I prep? What do I bring? Talk me through the system in a granular way.
Gotcha.
And this is for everybody.
Maybe we start with Matt talking about the hardware requirements and where we are with Mac OS versions.
Sounds wonderful.
That might be the best place to start with that.
Yeah, okay. So the currently released software, the Mbox version 4, written for Intel processor computers. But it is 100% compatible with the newer Apple Silicon computers. We get a lot of questions about that with people saying, can I buy a new computer? Is the software going to crash? And the answer is yes, you can buy a new computer. No, the software is not going to crash. But in the long run, we want to provide a piece of software that runs natively on those processors, and that's what Mbox version 5 is going to be. So at the moment, you're okay with whatever computer you've got. There's a certain age to the computer where the computer is too old or the computer is not powerful enough to do a good job. At the moment, the cutoff is somewhere around Yosemite, and it is somewhere around an Intel Core i7 with 4 cores. If you've got something that's worse than that, or older than that, or has an older version of the operating system, I don't think I would recommend at all that you use that. What you really want is you want as many CPU cores as possible. You want the best possible GPU that goes in that computer. You probably want at least 16 gigabytes of RAM. And then depending on how many outputs you want to drive or how many pixels you want to map, that's going to change maybe what kind of computer it is. Is it a laptop? Is it a desktop? Is it something like that? What I can say for the future is that the newer Apple Silicon computers are so much better. And I can't emphasize that enough. They are so much better when it comes to the performance that we require for Mbox. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, which I won't get into. But it's really astonishing how well they work. You know, the laptop that you can go and buy if you buy a MacBook Pro is a very capable computer these days. And it only goes up from there if you get a Mac Studio or potentially the new Mac Pro that came out this year.
Wonderful. Excellent. So Ben, we're gearing up. What do we got to bring with us?
Well,
Start talking about our kit.
Sure. So for those of you that are lighting programmers and you're like, okay, I like what I'm hearing about Mbox. Besides learning about it, what do I need? Let's start there.
Yeah.
So your console will hook up to a Apple computer, and your console is going to use SACN to talk to the Mac, right? That's the same thing that Director uses to talk to the Mbox Studio within the Mac computer. So to start with, you'll need the Mac computer. From there, if you want to talk about inputs and outputs, there's Blackmagic devices and capture cards and things like that to be able to ingest video and to send video out to different screens. So hardware-wise, it's kind of very minimal. I know John's setup is it still an iMac?
It's like a 7-year-old iMac.
Yeah.
Runs great.
Yeah.
And my laptop, which is like 4 years old, my power, I don't call them PowerBooks anymore, my Mac, that's my backup, and it can just as ably run whatever but I'm not doing like multiple 4K streams. I'm doing lower res stuff, but I've never had any bogs or hiccups or anything in my old ass iMac. It's great. Yeah.
So you have your Mac computer. If you're doing a laptop, you obviously don't need monitors, but if you're doing a desktop, a Mac Studio, even the Mac Minis can run it well. Then you're talking about monitors. And then at most on the feature narrative side, you're talking about an external Blackmagic device to process your ins and outs. So hardware-wise, it's pretty minimal. And then you're talking about your license for the actual software. The demo is available. Not that I'm plugging Matt's side of things. The demo is available, and I will note that it's very obvious in the demo when the big red Mbox screen comes up. But what's not obvious is when you're trying to pixel map, and pixel mapping just stops and is only valid for like 30 seconds in the demo, something like that.
It wasn't my idea. Somebody probably for 15 seconds and then turn on.
So as you're troubleshooting pixel mapping, and you're trying to get everything to work, and you finally think you have it work and it's not working, it's once you launch the program, it works for 15 seconds. Where I've said you should put a big red thing down there that says pixel mapping has stopped working.
Yeah.
Please be aware.
Yeah.
But that's the basics of the hardware side going through. What's that, Matt?
In my defense, at the bottom of the main window, there is a thing that says.
Yes,
Disabled.
So you're knee deep in Mbox remote, and you're trying to configure your outputs and everything else. You're not looking at that, and yes, it is there in yellow letters in the very bottom corner. So yes.
Downloading Mbox and on any Mac and just playing with it, it's you'll learn a lot just by playing with it in Director, noodling around. So
Question on that, should it be on, should that connection to the console be on its own network? Should it be split off from everything else?
It's gotta be on SACN, so I'll speak from the hog side, it's gotta be on your fixture net to connect to it. So it'll be there, because it's also gonna send out SACN packets out to your lights, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how you configure everything, so, yeah.
Yeah, it's just part of your network. I run hog and I unify, I put fixture and hog net on the same copper throughout. I just divide by IP addresses. And all my non-hog stuff is at 10 dot whatever. And that's what I lock in my media server at that. Fine. Immediately finds it. That's like the least, it's the most reliable part of the thing. It's always right there. I've never had troubleshooting. Like, did I click the right box? Is it, it works great.
I do run 2 networks with Mbox. I run a control network, and then I run my sync network, which does all my CITP. If I'm running 676, which if you don't know, I'm blanking on what CITP stands for, but it's sending the video back to the console, and I can see what's going on within my console. So it's low res, it's small, but it also sends thumbnails back. So in 676, I don't have to look in remote and see what, clip 13, folder 13, file 5 was. I have a thumbnail right there. So there's 2 separate networks, because I found that when you're, CITP bogs down the network, but when you're dealing with transferring a lot of content, like when you're doing car processing or something like that, and you're downloading terabytes worth of content, it's going to bog down your control network too. So just be aware of that. If you're going to be dealing with a lot of content, you do want to have 2 separate networks.
That's good. So it bogs it down. It only bogs down when it's refreshing, right? Your thumb, or
Correct. Well, if you are running CITP,
Yeah.
it's going to bog it down the whole time. Correct me if I'm wrong. Matt.
Constant feedback.
It's constant. If
Oh, I
it's a
didn't
video
realize that.
feedback, like
thought
I'm getting a constant feedback of what's going on within the cloud.
Yeah.
So if I'm running
It has
CITP,
effects, but it's not necessarily going to bog it down. It really depends on how good the computer is.
okay.
yeah,
So after you sync your media though, if your media is not changing, you can turn.
you
it off.
can, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just, there are those times, my show that I'm going into next week, I'm constantly downloading and jamming new media in. And I don't know, if Matt says that it's cool to do it on one network, that's cool. I just personally, I run 2 networks. So,
I think that in many situations, we used to recommend trying to do it on 2 separate universes, 2 separate networks. The problem is for a lot of users is that they already have a dedicated network for their lighting rig, and to try and have a completely different network for some fixtures in the rig versus the rest of the fixtures in the rig doesn't make any sense. And then a lot of the time we find people are like to merge certain functionality, because Mbox can only control the color of the fixture, and there are other things like the pan and the tilt, if we're talking about rock and roll world, and the brightness or the shutter or the dimmer functions that Mbox can't control, where a console or perhaps Mbox has to merge somewhere of 2 separate sources of data. And to do the merge, it really has to all be on the same network.
Yeah.
For the best results, or the easier results, I guess.
sure. But are you, now I'm kind of going way back to Moscow Miss Universe. I was having problems with the 676 ArtNet side of things, and having CITP. I was told CITP was bogging it down, and that's when I broke out to the second universe. Is that not the case?
The idea behind the role network and the monitoring and content management network, those need to be separate networks.
Okay.
But from the point of view of lighting control coming into the Mbox and then lighting control coming out of the Mbox, I would say that 75% or more of the time, those are the same physical network. No need to have separate networks for that.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense.
So you're talking about functionality that many of these folks may not be using because they're not using CITP.
Yeah.
And they may not be using the remote application or the director application where they need some of that sort of remote monitoring, remote management.
Matt, can you define CITP for those of us who don't know?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Could you define CITP for those of us who don't know?
CITP is an open source protocol. I'm remembering correctly, it stands for Control Interface Transport Protocol. It encompasses many things, but the main functionality that we use and which some consoles support is something called MSEX, which is short for Media Server Exchange, I think. And it is a protocol that we use when a console requests.
Sorry.
When a console requests thumbnails from the media server, those get sent using MSEX. And when a console requests streaming video feedback from the media server, then that gets sent using MSEX as well. So sending thumbnails is just a one-shot deal. You ask for thumbnails and the thumbnails get sent. So during that period of time, there may be bandwidth on the network, but it's not very big and it doesn't last for very long. However, the streaming of the actual sort of what you're playing on the layer or what each output is doing, that happens constantly. And depending on how many layers you're trying to view or how many outputs you're trying to view, this could be as many as 10, 12, 15, 20 streams of a very small video, but the video going over the network that is pretty much going to eat up a lot of the bandwidth on that particular network. And that's why we try to advocate separating that particular network from your control network, because ideally your control network is the most important thing. Getting data to your lighting fixtures is more important than it is for you to get visual feedback from the media server.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll throw this question out to whoever wants to field it or multiples. James, I'm looking at you. Talk to me about SMPTE timecode, how you experience it in your workflow, how it plays in. Yeah, jump on in.
So my biggest experience with SMPTE timecode is dealing with playing back artist controlled content that has to go with the beat of music. And the difference with the frame rate that the content is rendered in, and then sometimes they send me a different type of SMPTE standard that they thought would work. Or numbers, they give me wrong numbers sometimes, and they're like, no, this is what the numbers should be. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm seeing. Sometimes there's a frame delay with, the network of them sending SMPTE timecode from their rig to my console and to the Mbox, and that they don't understand that we need pre-roll. People just don't understand that.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
So question, I don't do rock and roll, that type of stuff much. Whenever I deal with SMPTE, I go right to the board, and that's like my master playback list there will fire off the video if there's any present.
Yes.
So do you take SMPTE into the Mbox?
I take it straight into the Mbox.
And as well as your console?
Sometimes, depending upon if I need my cues to fire with on exact beats.
Yeah.
But most of the time for just video playback, I'm sending it straight to Mbox. I don't even need to see the console. Mbox has its own channel, timecode channel, and within version 4 that has made it tremendously easier than what it was from 2.
Yep.
Version 2 was kind of a pain to deal with, but now it's its own channel. You just dial up what value your time should be and set, hey, this layer needs to listen to this time, and it just goes playback. You set in a certain playback mode, and it runs. It's the easiest thing ever.
Nice.
Yeah, I really hate doing time code for lighting, but time code for video with Mbox is so easy that I don't have to think about it until you get into rehearsal and you find out that you're 6 frames back and everybody's arguing if you're going 6 frames or 6 frames backwards. Like,
we could sit there for a half hour and be like, okay, 2 more frames. Okay. 2 more frames. Okay. No.
So James, when they're you said their people are sending you time code. Are they sending you a video package like the raw stream? No, they're just sending you.
They're
the time
sending me
code,
audio, SMPTE time
and
code.
they've already
left
given you
channel.
the package of video.
Yeah.
And you know when you want to drop it, what trigger points you want.
Yeah, usually they hopefully the night before they gave me the
First, course.
yeah. Well, usually it's
Not
one,
even, yeah,
it's one clip. So it's one
Okay.
big
You just
file
start.
that just starts it and it
Got it.
just runs until the end of the song. It's
Okay.
great.
Yeah, when artists bring their content in, it can be very easy because you only have to do one cue and you're done with Mbox and you just have to deal with lighting. Or it can be very difficult because, communication issues and that sort of thing. But yeah, you don't have to worry about your voice chorus and all that sort of
Yeah.
thing. It's just one clip.
Start at the
straight
beginning.
through. You don't like you kind of watch it and you know your colors that you're gonna have to deal with. It's really easy when they come in and it's time code.
There's been times where they've wanted it to be on time code. We've sat there for half hour to an hour, sometimes trying to figure out the start points. And they're just like, screw it, finger sync it. Finger syncing is just as easy. I mean, sometimes
Sometimes it is.
Is that a technical term?
finger sync,
Finger syncing?
the go button on the right time. You kind of learn when you need to do the go on the media playback.
And in the commercial music video world, a lot of times you have your inbox set up with, 10 pieces of media and you're having to cue it from the console. Like what John was talking about, you're taking the SMPTE of the song, right? In music video, you're playing that song back, 100 times in that day. And each time they're sending you the time code that you're changing the lighting, you're changing the video packages that are coming through. So your box is set up with your 20 video packages. And then in your timeline or in your cue stack, you're queuing, all right, now go to video, go video 2, go video 3, things like that. So that's just a different way to do that SMPTE into the console.
Yeah.
And then your console has the cues from there. It just depends on how you're
Yeah,
getting
it's
your video
different.
package. Yeah.
Different workflows for different parts of the industry. I imagine in commercials, they're not going to come with, very customized content that the artist has been working on for months and, goes back to some therapy moments. So yeah, when you're dealing with a specific artist and their music and what they're bringing to the show, it kind of makes it a little easier sometimes because they've created the piece for you to just play back. Yeah.
Before we move into question and answer, is there a last tag or something that we haven't talked about yet that any of you would like to mention or bring up for discussion?
Yeah, I got one that I think would apply to a lot of people here. And when you're getting into lighting and working with Mbox, one of the really cool features that Mbox can do is it can ingest in the non-RGB data from the console, and it can merge that into an SAC universe and send it out to the lights. So what that means is Mbox can control the RGB pixel data. But in the movie world and commercial world, you also have your intensity, you have your CCT, your plus and minus screen, your crossfade, and your RGB values. And you might want to control those from the console to quickly make them all 3200 because the boss says that. But then in the next take, you might want to throw a piece of media in there. Well, Mbox has the ability for the console to send all of that non-pixelated data to Mbox, and then Mbox will add in the RGB data, and then it will send it out to your lights. So it's I forget what the exact feature is called. It's like SACN merge. I don't know if Matt has that, but it's just a really cool way because the biggest thing with RGB data is when RGB are all at full, what does that make? Audience participation. White. Well, what is white, right? In our world, white is a color temperature. White is the combination of CCT and plus and minus screen, depending on how you are manipulating your data. Mbox can't do anything with CCT or plus and minus screen. So the console has to do that. And then the console can package that and send that with the RGB data from Mbox to get to your lights. So once you get into it, you could go down the deep dive of the merger there.
Yeah.
It just makes it really powerful because before I really found out about that, I had to go in and use parked channels to try and change that within Mbox. And of course, you can't queue things up that way, right? If you set your CCT in Mbox as a parked channel to 3200, if you go back 3 takes, you have to remember what you did and go back in Mbox and type it back in because it only tracks the RGB data.
It's kind of mind blowing sometimes how much video knowledge you have to know also with Mbox as a lighting guy. I didn't expect that. And there's times where video guys are coming to me going, "What are you doing?" And I'm like having to explain myself. And they're like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." I'm like, "Okay, great."
Yeah, I do have to say a lot of the times to like the video engineers that come up to me, just so you know, I'm a lighting guy that plays a video guy on TV. Yeah, that's my line to video guys.
I know just enough
Yeah, just enough
to make the boss smile.
just
Yeah,
enough
that's all
to
I
piss
got.
you guys off.
Yeah.
All right, so we,
I would say a couple things to. The reason media servers came about, I think, was to take the video away from the video departments and to give it the lighting department. So part of that trade-off is that you guys who are doing the lighting, shall we say, have to become partial video guys at the same time. I'm here to tell you as much as I know from the media server side of things, but most of you guys probably know way more about lighting than I do, if not all of you guys. And many of you guys probably know way more about video than I do as well. I just know how to get Mbox to do the right thing given certain circumstances. One of the things I'm hoping to get out of both our discussion here, but also from the future moving forwards, is Mbox wasn't originally designed to be something that was used for lighting on TV and film sets. When we implemented pixel mapping, it was to make the lights in your rock and roll rig be the same color as the video. It wasn't meant for any sort of enhanced environment stuff. So it's a pretty steep learning curve for me, especially take the concepts that you guys want to deal with and try to put that into a product that wasn't originally designed to do that. So I've had conversations with Ben about color temperature and those aspects that we can't control because the computer is really only talking RGB. It knows nothing about white. It knows nothing about color temperature. It knows nothing about minus green. So we have to work in a way where we can output something that you guys can work with, or the fixtures that you guys are using work with. So I'm here to listen to what you guys want, what you guys need, and to help improve the product or to help you understand how to use the product to get the best results out of it.
I think that's very wonderful because I will speak for us. We as a community, that's not the largest sector in lighting. There are much larger sectors of the lighting community out there in live entertainment. Really appreciate being listened to. And I will commit personally to creating a little forum on our website to go out and do some product feedback and some, not product feedback, but rather lighting guy feedback, film guy feedback, and start developing what we want. You're probably going to hear some of this in today's question and answer session as well. Sure. So we're going to get a good head start on that, but we will take the lead in trying to help. What I hear is we have a manufacturer saying we want to help you do it a way that's easier for you. And I'll tell you that there are certain manufacturers who do that, and there are other manufacturers who maybe don't do that as well. And it is a pleasure to work with manufacturers who do get our feedback and do want to give us a product that we want. And we're going to engage you on that, Matt. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I do have to say every single thing I've ever asked for in Mbox, Matt has put in there. Every single thing.
Good job, Matt. All right, so we're doing the discussion period.
If only every user could say that.
I haven't given bad ideas that have been ignored.
We're going to transition into the question and answer period. We will take maybe a short little 5-minute break to use the restroom. But before we go, I would like you to close with, and this is for anybody here or everybody, either a nightmare story or like a heaven, oh my God, it saved my butt story, but something memorable from your past experience that says, oh, this happened to me and it was the end of the world, or it was the greatest thing that ever happened. Don't be shy. Matt's not listening.
I mean, I'll go nightmare. And it's really, this was kind of a therapy moment with Matt when I was talking about it earlier. I was doing Penn and Teller Fool Us, and it was after COVID, so we put an audience wall in, and pre-COVID we were all under 4K. all of a sudden we put this giant video wall in that was over 4K and, just all sorts of technical things that were through the pipeline to make it happen. But, long story short, too late. At some point in time, one of the Macs died. And when I tried to switch over to the backup, we had to sub-rent it. PRG had to sub-rent it, and I didn't know the passcode. Like the screen locked, and I didn't know the passcode. And it was like 9 o'clock at night in Las Vegas. And God, I feel so bad. This was like the one time I ever threw up the bat signal, and I called Matt, and I was losing my stuff. Going, Matt, I can't. What was going on was the Mac couldn't connect. Mac wasn't seeing the Image Pro 4K and was coming up in 1080 and not coming up in 4K. So he kept saying, Matt has the calmest, coolest voice when you're in a pure panic. And I was absolutely in panic. Like there were people looking at me like, oh man, is everything okay? And just listening to Matt, like, no, this is the fact of what goes on. And just listening to Matt, he talked me through it. I think we had to restart the computer like 3 or 4 times and in a certain sequence, and you find that A, B, left, right, select, start sequence, and it all worked. It was fine. There was nothing broken. There was nothing else. It was just starting it back up, and Matt was
Talked you down.
talked me down, talked me off the ledge.
I'll share a few years ago, I got hired to do a Rolex commercial, and it was a series of interviews. They were flying around the world interviewing filmmakers. Rolex, I think it was Rolex. And when they blew through Los Angeles, I got hired to do that. I didn't travel the world. I just did the LA, which was, we interviewed Inarritu, and Chivo is a DP, and those guys are pals. And the gaffer said to me, hey, they're going to be playing a video package of the filmmaker's life behind him, and we want the S360 above the key light to be, or it will be the key light, it will be mimicking what's on the video. And I said, yeah, easy. And then I hung up the phone. This is before I'd used Mbox for video in. So immediately I try not to throw up. And I called my friend Gideon Markham. He's like, yeah, that's super, no problem. He talks me through it. And then I emailed Matt and I said, what hardware do I need? He immediately got back to me. Thank you. Got the Black Magic dongle I needed. Show up to the set, do the thing. I'm, in the manual, texting with my buddy Gideon, getting it working. It starts to work. I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. And I'm, tweaking it, making it nice. And we're about ready to roll. We have the stand-in sitting in the spot where the subject will be, and it's looking great. It's working perfectly. I can master the intensity. I've got the color. I can grade the image quickly. And Chivo comes over and he says, oh, look at that. It's good. It looks perfect. He's like, this is the first place. We've been to London, to New York, to Mexico City. Everyone promised me they can do it. No one can figure it out. Like, that's excellent. Thank you. Talk about. So I'm a firm believer in the power of Mbox.
My story is very short because a lot of my Mbox experience has been, like I said, in image-based lighting, but in more of a research setting. And it's whenever you get stuck, you have a guy like Gideon or John Hervis to call and say, hey, how do I do this thing? I know it should be able to do this. It better be able to do this. So to that end, talk with the network of people that you have, because they'll be the biggest ones to get you out of the jam, because they were probably in that jam last week and they found a way through it themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And on that note, this taking a video image in and then moving or mimicking what a video wall has on our rig is so cool and so fun. I'll say that. Nerd. Super fun. I want to teach just that to people that have a program, have a console and an Mbox that are actually gigging with them. I want to share the how-to. It's just muscle memory. You just got to go through the patching and the thing, and it's really easy once you've done it. But I really want to spread the word because it's really great. That's great.
I'd say one of my biggest kind of crazy things was Oblivion. I was there as a projectionist. This is when I worked at PRG, but I ended up also being the media server tech for the first month and setting them all up, setting 15 servers up that doing 30 outputs to 30 different projectors and like that whole rig. I just look back on that and go, wow, I did that. It's pretty crazy. So yeah.
I did the camera test for that.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I wish I'd gotten to do the show.
It was I was only supposed to be there for a week as the projectionist to set up the projectors, and I ended up being there for a month and a half or so. It was nuts. It was fun.
Okay, I want to thank the panelists. Oh, Matt, you got a story?
Does Matt have a horror story?
Matt, you probably have everybody's story.
Was really.
It's time.
I don't know that I have a horror story. I mean, certainly there have been moments where we have been trying to roll out new software. And the Madonna tour was one of the first shows where we were working on, I don't remember which version of Mbox, but it was a big change going from OS 9 to Tiger or whatever the next thing was. And we had an issue on the show where all of a sudden the machine would just lock up, stop working. And there am I sitting there in the arena trying to help the guys solve the problem. And unfortunately at the time, the guy who was writing the software had been working so hard on it for so long that he was completely burned out. And he went on vacation to South of France with his family for a week or something like that. I'm just gone, just completely gone. And there am I in the arena with the customer breathing down my neck, and there was absolutely nothing that I could do. There was nothing that I could do for the client, and there was nothing that PRG could do at that point in time other than me apologize and have the actual salesperson apologize to our actual customer and say, we're very, very sorry. You know, we need more time. And that was a very hard experience. It taught me a lot about diplomacy. It also taught me a lot about being patient with those who were doing the heavy lifting. And it also taught me a lot about how to deal with pressure situations like that, whether it's of our own making or whether it's a client coming to us with a pressure situation, and how to try and stay as cool as possible. But it's stuff like that that have made me especially very, very careful about trying to release the best possible products that we can from a stability point of view, because I know that for you guys and users, any little blip or a lockup or a crash or something like that, it's critical because so many of you guys are doing things that are live or things that are very expensive. If something goes wrong and everything comes to a screeching halt, it's not acceptable when you have that level of disruption in your show or in your shoot or something like that. So anytime you ask me a question, anytime we talk about performance, anytime we talk about, can I use this beta version of software, or when are you going to release the software, I am always going to err on the side of caution. It's just a lot of experience that has led me to that position. And sometimes I'm sorry that it has to be that way. You know, we all want to rush out and use the new stuff. We all want to know that it does the best possible thing, but I'm always going to be cautious. But so far, fingers crossed, it's led to pretty good results.
Yeah. All right, great stories. So we're done with our presentation portion. I actually think we're going to just, I'll take your feedback, but I think we'll just jump right into question and answer. It feels like we're rolling.
Yeah.
I have, we'll solicit questions from the room in person. I have a list of questions from the internet that I can relay as well. So anybody have a question? Okay, so I have one from Brian Wallace. Brian, thank you for tuning in. Expanding on what Ben was saying, if you are using Mbox for pixel mapping and you want to change the white point of the content that's being played on fixtures, what's everyone's workflow? Go.
So I'll start since I brought it up, I guess. So the feature that I was talking about inside of Mbox, I guess there's two ways to do that. One is the feature inside of Mbox. So if you set Mbox to output to your lights on Universe 4, for instance, and then you set your console to output to those same lights on Universe 3, you can make Mbox listen to Universe 3 for your color temperature data. And then it will send that out to Universe 4 for your lights to listen to. And when it does that, it will add the RGB values to that Universe 4, right? So your lights are set on Universe 4. Mbox is talking to the lights on Universe 4. The console is talking to those lights on Universe 3 that Mbox is listening to. And then Mbox adds that color data, or adds the color temperature data to Universe 4 when it sends it out. The other way you can do it is in Mbox, you can go to the CCT channel and you can do a parked value of, let's say, 128, 0 to 255, DMX bytes. You could park it at 128, figure out what the map is on that fixture, and that will set your CCT. The problem is your console is not tracking that CCT value. So you may be fine to leave it there. That's a lot of times the quicker solution than to do the ingesting of the SACN. But that would be the other way to do that. You could set your intensity at 100, which is just a park channel. So your first park channel at 255, your second park channel at 128, your third channel, if that's plus and minus green, you leave that at 128, and so on. So that's kind of the two methods that I would use depending on how much time you have to set up, how much you will be using those fixtures when pixel mapping. Like if it's just a short thing, then just park them in the console. That's how I would deal with it. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't have much to add to that. That's right on. I haven't done it enough. Ben's kind of the expert. Ben and John would be one of the experts on that.
For me, it's just kind of down and dirty. You can adjust the overall color of any layer. So if you just have a white box you put up there and you crank, turn and introduce red, it'll just be a red box now. So if the color point's not looking, if I'm like, again, video wall in a volume, we built our own overhead box to extend their ceiling. They didn't bother to build. We have them, they're the master. So, or they're the benchmark. So they're displaying their content. And then I'm kind of adding or subtracting colors to get I'm sampling what they're pushing up there. I'm getting their video, but I'm adding or subtracting color to kind of get it to match. So I'm kind of live grading it as needed, but my world's all down and dirty. I'm never repeating gigs more than once. I'm not touring with this. So there's probably a better way than to doing it on the fly.
I mean, that's in rock and roll, in the rock and roll side of it at Kimmel. That's how I would do it. If I bring up a white square, it doesn't look white to me, and be like, yep, okay, that looks white now.
Same way. Good.
Yeah. With the lights, it also depends on the lighting manufacturer, because when you are using RGB, is it using the white light diodes to get your best color quality, or is it just using your RGB? And does that matter to the gaffer or the DP? I know there's some gaffer and DPs who are like, just make it as bright as possible. That's not a big concern of theirs, the SSI, the CRI of the light. So it just depends on, I guess, the permutations that you're under.
So when you're, I got a question for you in pixel mapping, then when you're dealing with multiple types of lights and you're pixel mapping them, do you integrate them within your pixel map, or do you have separate spaces so you can put layers per light and you can mix per light?
So each array or each bank of lights, like if I have a bank that's on that wall that's 24 by 12 pixels, 280 whatever pixels, I'll make that an output.
Yep.
And then I'll have the other side of the stage be another output. I will generally keep the manufacturers together, even if they're kind of sparsed in the rig, because the way that they mix color is different.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I'm often copying layers and getting it right on one, copying the layer over with all the same timing and same effects, and doing a little tweak to try and get that to match.
Gotcha. Yeah.
All right, here's a, okay, yes, please,
love to hear.
absolutely.
As part of developing version 5, I was looking at a couple of different pixel mapping output types. And testing with a lighting fixture a couple of weeks ago, and ran into this question, color temperature, because I'm sitting there sending white out from that box, pixel mapping to this fixture. And and then holding up a light meter against the wall, and basically, what I want to know is how far away from white, white is this particular color being, output from the light. The problem is that I would say 90% of the time, the light meter is not able to give me a reading because it's not within the color temperature range or whatever it is that the light meter is expecting. And this is something that I don't have a whole lot of knowledge about, but something I can tell you guys, and this is one of those things that I want to have your help on, is how to deal with this, because in the RGB world on the computer screen and the way that we convert those RGB colors to what comes out for pixel mapping, there is absolutely no concept of color temperature in the way that you guys think about it coming from lighting fixtures. There's no concept of CCT, minus green or plus green or anything like that. We can do stuff in the RGB world that might sort of replicate that. But what I need is, feedback from you guys and to work with you guys to actually make that better, or to help make Mbox a better tool as much as it can be in those circumstances.
Yeah, I think that would come down to manufacturers making profiles that are compatible with like what we call global variables. So if you have a pixelated light that's 48 pixels, you only need one parameter of color temperature for all 48 of those pixels, generally speaking. So that's the type of thing that those type of controls and those handles inside of Mbox that we can manipulate would kind of help simplify the SAC and merger side of things. So if you're doing a simpler rig, you could still have that track in the console. So we'll talk.
I actually, on the same topic, kind of, but kind of a left turn. Would GDTF information help within the color space and everything, Matt? Like if you were to get that information from the manufacturers and somehow implement it?
No, because I've got no way of taking the RGB that comes off the screen and with any concept of what color temperature is.
Gotcha.
If somebody were to build me a table, like a LUT essentially, that is convert what we're doing to 6,500 Kelvin or something, or 3,300 Kelvin, then a LUT could do something like that.
Okay.
Just tone everything in the appropriate direction, more towards an amber or more towards green or whatever direction you're looking to go. Then that is something that can work. But I can't go into the computer, and there's nowhere in the software I can go and say, make the white point 6,500 Kelvin.
Yeah,
Really
I just think it's simpler than that. I think
color spaces, there's some adjustment for that, but we're not really talking, lighting fixture kind of color temperature.
Yeah, I just think it's simpler than that. I think a layer should have a CCT value that can get passed on to the light.
There is an effect CCT.
But you're still manipulating the RGB and you're still hoping that manufacturer has done the color correctly.
Yeah.
So
Here is a question that is probably for Matt, but anybody who wants to jump in, can you please describe the upcoming changes or additions in Mbox 5.0? Take it away, Matt.
Yep. That's
It's a very complicated topic, but the biggest thing is that number one, we are changing from OpenGL under the hood to a different graphics programming language called Metal. And this is the biggest thing that has had to change, and this is the thing that has taken the most amount of time. This is the reason why it's not done yet. But it is coupled with the new Apple Silicon computers is the thing that is going to bring the most performance improvements to the product. Because of the complexity of that task, the initial release of Mbox version 5 is not going to be substantially different than Mbox version 4. And I don't know that it's going to be something where everyone is going to need to rush out and change from one version to the other. It's going to depend on what your hardware currently is and how comfortable you feel with using older hardware, and whether or not you get the performance results you want. But That's the biggest change. The other changes are that it becomes a native application. So, or a universal application rather. So it will run equally well, or it runs natively on an Intel processor, and it also runs natively on an Apple Silicon processor. The current software is written for Intel processors only. But as I said earlier in the discussion, the current software works perfectly well on Apple Silicon computers. It's just that version 5 will give you better performance on Apple Silicon computers moving forwards, and also more compatibility in the future, better longevity of software.
I think you might have alluded to this, but I'll be explicit. Do you expect any significant change to the user interface in Mbox 5.0?
No.
None. That was definitive. Okay, moving on, questions? Oh,
That's the beginning.
no, for now.
Ultimately, yes, there will be changes and enhancements. The initial release had 0 user interface changes.
I have a question in the room.
I have a question. I'm primarily using Mbox in conjunction with MH3 for pixel mapping. As our lighting rigs get bigger and more complicated, I find myself wanting 3D pixel mapping, which is something that some of the other media servers provide. It's not something I've been able to figure out in Mbox currently. I'm aware that the current pixel mapper is 2D only, but do you guys possibly have a workaround with layers or context that allows you to do something like this? I know you can add 3D objects to video, but I can't really pixel map my lights to those 3D objects, or can I?
Before you answer, I just want to check with the tech team. Were we able to hear the question on our recording? Okay, we're good to go, please. 3D pixel mapping
3D in resolution.
and 3D chess.
I haven't had a need. I mean, maybe Matt can talk about, whether there's a future in 3D mapping with an Mbox. I haven't had a need for it yet.
So the question is, like, if you have an array, a 3D array of, say, pixels hanging from the ceiling, you've got,
Yeah.
20 rows, columns,
I've got,
stacked.
Curtains, like a 10 by 10 curtain
Yeah.
of pixels, for example, and I want to do like a hologram effect of like a face or an object that's spinning.
Or you want to go through.
Or want to go through it. Or
Yeah.
That's the one I always.
I know.
It's something that, is super easy on, not to mention other media servers here, but Matrix, for example, has a 3D pixel map that is like fully movable, et cetera.
I think, Matt will probably talk about it, but, I think Mbox's pixel mapper is more in its infancy than it is in its final form, maybe, hopefully. Because as he said, Mbox was built as a video-based product, not necessarily a pixel mapper. So, Matt, is there any future in a 3D-based pixel mapper for Mbox?
I don't know, to be honest. People have asked this question before. Matrix is a very good product for the things that it does, but it doesn't do many of the things that Mbox does. Coming from a different space. Part of the complication of 3D video pixel mapping, I guess, is what you're actually trying to do with it. So if you're literally talking a 3-dimensional array of LED fixtures, then you need to have some sort of content, shall we say, that is sliced into various different depths. And then each slice becomes one of these planes of fixtures in your 3D array, or something like that. If you wanted to try and do that in Mbox, then you could have every single layer or each layer be one of those slices. And you have to build your video appropriately so that the video that you play on that layer is a particular slice in that 3D map. But we are going away currently of dealing with 3D stuff in the way that Matrix does. And I think Matrix gives you a lot of generative type content across that 3D array. It doesn't necessarily, and I may be wrong, I don't know if it has a way of making a 3D movie and then playing that 3D movie across a 3-dimensional array of pixels. pixels. So long story short is, don't really have any plans to do that right now. But if some compelling reason comes up in the future, we're always eager to look at ways of making the product better. So I guess the answer is maybe, but we'll have to wait and see.
Is it on a list?
Not really.
Fair enough.
I have a question from the chat here. We're from Brian Warreneck. Brian, what's up, buddy? I hope you're out there listening. Is there any plan for some training videos for new users of Mbox? I'm willing to take a stab at answering this one.
Well, I mean, I'll say that I think the current videos, you know, I'm going to give Matt a lot of credit. The current videos that he has out there are really good. You just got to get onto the PRG website and bang through them. New ones, he's going to have to talk about that.
Well, I'll say that I'll take a moment to plug that we are going to be doing you and I and James is coming next week through 7/28. There'll be an in-person class here at Open Source. And Matt, here, you know, Lightscape and Open Source has in our relationship with Zac and James and you and all of our friends here, a certain appetite if there is desire for some curriculum. We'd like to help you put that together.
Yeah, I mean, this is we're putting a class together for 7/28. This is going to be the first time I'm teaching this class. I've taken Matt's 2-day intensive class. I'm going to break that into 2 individual days. The first, and it's separate signups through 7/28 for those of you not part of that. Sorry, part of the union. Just looking to join a union, but I won't get into all that. Yeah, we could maybe set something up through Open Source,
Yeah, we'll see
and
how
I can
it
take
goes.
that. But the first day of the course is going to be a basics. We're controlling everything through Director, and I'm going to take you through the basics of getting a show and doing a show in video, not in light, no pixel mapping, nothing like that. We're just going to get through some basics of how to get content out of an Mbox, maybe downloaded, all that sort of thing. And then day 2 is going to be more of a lab where we will have Mboxes here, hopefully some consoles we're working on. We'll start out with a couple of advanced topics, mixes and that sort of thing. And then get into pixel mapping, and then we'll sit there and it'll be kind of a hands-on Q&A, get some pixel mapping in, that sort of thing. So it's 2-day coming up.
That'll be Thursday and
6th and 7th.
6th and 7th of July. And I think we're looking at that as a Thursday, Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Please visit the IATSE 728 training page to sign up. Contact Alan Rowe through there, but really just sign up on the training website. If you do not have the union affiliation, come talk to us and we'll figure out how to help you. But we are here big time supporting of 728 and our union brothers and sisters. So we're going to do that there first. And then we will talk if there's a way for us to record and distribute some basic stuff in addition to support the material that is already out there in the world.
Yeah.
Further questions in the room? Yes, sir.
So thinking of training, can you think of any online sources that have been beneficial when you're in those, oh shit, I have a video file, I'm not a video guy, I need to learn this. Besides asking EIT guy.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the big things that'll help you out is in Mbox utilities. There's AFB batch converter, and it's a very simple program. It's not a PRG program, but they include it with the Mbox download, and that will do your converting. Otherwise, you're going to have to get into doing Adobe type stuff. So I have not gone down the Adobe route. I've managed to be able to convert everything with an AFB batch converter. Until just recently, but that's a whole nother story because it had audio involved, which I'm going to talk to you about. Other than that, other resources, learn what an Image Pro is and does. Like that's not a PRG product, but that's something that as a lighting guy and you need to learn video, learn what an Image Pro does, learn all the ins and outs of it. You know,
I mean, the biggest resource for me was someone would say, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z a term. I wouldn't know what, NTSC is, and Google it. I mean, that's straight up. I'd be like, okay, what's
Yeah.
NTSC? Okay, oh, that's what it is. I mean, that's been the biggest thing. Just their keyword thrown out at me, and I'm like, research later. Research.
There is
On the job site.
Yeah.
There's a
pretty much.
Facebook group for Mbox Q&A user group.
That's true.
yeah,
It hasn't been very active, but I think all this talk-
yeah, hopefully.
Yes, every now and then, exactly.
There's there's when questions go out, they do get answered. Hopefully the user base will kind of,
And Matt usually used to monitor that a lot and would respond pretty fastly to issues you'd have.
yeah. I don't want to promise Matt social media.
Not the best at looking at Facebook.
But
You tend to use that as your opportunity to ask the community a question. If I happen to notice that somebody is giving an incorrect answer, it's blatantly incorrect, I may chime in. But it's easier for me if you guys just email the Mbox support at PRG email, or if you happen to have my phone number, just call me and ask the questions, because you'll get a much more direct answer. Now, I admit that the entire community may not benefit from my answer. But there's no reason why after the fact you can't go and share that information with other people. It's just much easier to get into the level of detail that we need to get into for many of these questions if we can do it via email or a phone call.
Yeah.
Rather than
Yeah.
going on a telephone.
Make sure to post your phone number on the internet.
Um,
Just kidding, Matt.
That's just, emailing Matt for Mbox specific questions, but I think you were talking more for like the video side, the stuff that's not in the manual, right? Which I'm going to say, if you read through the manual, Matt has done a really good job of including other hardware and talking about certain things, and you will learn a lot just by reading through the manual. Read through the content creation pages in the manual, and you'll learn about codecs and you'll learn about frame rates and all that sort of thing. And it'll spark more questions. I know reading through manual sounds effing terrible, but it's one of those things. I've actually learned a lot of video stuff just reading through that manual and poking into a couple, stoking questions.
Yeah, and I'd say to what to point you towards to learn more about, which is the thing that constantly would hobble me, still takes me down occasionally, is resolution and frame rate.
Mhm.
Those are the things you need to conform. This machine generated it, this machine's playing it, this machine, like, everyone has to be on the same page. All the machines need to have the right boxes, the right drop down selected. 2398 versus 24 versus 30 versus 2998. All that shit, which to me means almost nothing, but I learned from talking to the camera guys and video guys. I learned on the set by, asking them for Google. But whenever I've had a problem, more times than not, of signal not getting to where it's supposed to go, or looking like shit, or you see drop frames, or you see a stutter or something. You look it looks great. You look at what the camera sees, you playback. Oh, it looks like shit. It's frame rate inconsistency, incompatibility. Learn about that. I think that, resolution, frame rate, and hertz. And then, general IP shit, just to get all the machines talking.
Yeah. He should. I will. I just did think of something. Laura Frank has an excellent book. And I cannot say enough good things about that woman. She is amazing and has contributed so much to our community. So Laura Frank has a book called Media Server Professionals or something. I feel terrible. It sits by my bedside, but if you look up Laura Frank, I feel like she has a couple books out right now. And then there's another book by Vicki Claiborne, Matt.
Yeah, Vicky
Vicki did a media server. I think that's more on the tech side, and Laura's is more on the content.
Screens
screens producing type stuff. And her book is fantastic. I've read through it twice.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Questions from the room? We're getting,
There was one NDI question that was.
oh yeah.
That was
So
like the
Robert
first one.
White
Let's get back to that one.
says, and I have it right here. Robert, thanks for, can we touch on, please, the use of NDI over an SDI feed?
Great.
Can you talk about that? And for some of us, can you just translate that, please?
Okay, so I had stoked this question because I'd love to hear Matt talk about this. NDI is it's an internet IP-based video signal that Mbox can intake, and then you can spit it out via SDI. That's what it does, but talk more about it. I think that's more of a map thing and the integration of it. Are there
Do
other?
you use it?
I have used it. I've taken web-based video feeds like Zoom and fed it into Mbox. We did that for Penn and Teller Fool Us when we had remote poolers. We took an NDI feed in and played it back into the video wall. I haven't done it enough to talk about like ins and outs of it. I stumbled through it, got it working twice. It's I see the use of it. I've had multiple times where we've gone down the path we were going to use it and made a left turn and didn't, but I've used it twice, like I said. So it's a great thing. I mean, Matt, is there any quirks to NDI and Mbox that you can think of? Any pitfalls?
Our preferred capture card is Blackmagic, or our preferred capture device is Blackmagic. Mbox may be able to use some other product, but it doesn't work as well because we've specifically implemented the Blackmagic SDK. We've also implemented the NDI SDK, and to be honest, the two things will get you exactly the same result in the end. You can get the same sort of video, the same resolutions and the same frequencies into the machine. They probably have a similar latency, although in some cases the latency for NDI may be slightly lower. NDI doesn't require any additional hardware, but it does require a fair amount of knowledge and a fair amount of sophisticated setup on your network. So if you don't know how to set up your network properly, or if your network switch gear is not up to the task, then NDI is going to fail spectacularly. Whereas with the Blackmagic stuff, it's reasonably simple. You have a box that you plug into the computer, or there's a card that goes into the computer, and you connect regular old video to that. And that video is sort of a known factor. You're not going to have a network issue with a Blackmagic device. You might drop frames if the thing doesn't have enough performance, and the latency might be a little bit more than what you want. But you're not going to have a problem if all of a sudden one of the network switches goes down, or there's not enough bandwidth on the network. We have also found that the mixture of NDI output from a computer and some NDI devices is somewhat incompatible, because the way the computer generates video on the software side of things for network stream doesn't have a consistent frame rate. If we have a piece of software that is just looping over and over and over and generating frames of video and then spitting them out, there's no guarantee that comes out at a perfect 60 hertz. No guarantee it comes out at a perfect 59.94. There are some devices out there that will receive NDI, and if the frame rate is not absolutely perfect all the time, they will just stop working. So that's on the output side of things. Mbox doesn't really care on the input side of things, as long as there's enough bandwidth and as long as Mbox has enough processing power on the computer to receive the signal at the rate you're sending it and the resolution you're sending it, then it will work great. As to which one's better, are you getting SDI? Then you want to capture card. If you have some way to convert that into NDI, or somebody is spitting it out from some other computer, then maybe NDI is the better choice. It's really down to what works best for you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to use copper anytime in a situation like that. Like, you know, I already run 2 different networks, and then you threw an NDI network in there too, and you're just kind of mucking up everything. So simplicity wise, I'd prefer to, you know, get some copper and go straight into a Blackmagic capture card. But you know, if NDI is needed, I understand you. Yeah.
Robert's response, just to throw it out there, was, and this is in the chat on the Zoom, from a film TV programmer's perspective, I am wondering if anyone is using it more frequently because we already have large networks installed for our content overlays. So that really kind of answered that, but I just wanted to be faithful to the question in the chat, and I see a response in the room.
Follow up.
Yeah, let's
Speak up loudly. We have our mics up here.
So I do work film, TV all the time, 728. I use NDI very frequently with Mbox.
Sure.
Mainly as a reference video into MA3.
Okay.
But I have also run NDI from other sources into Mbox through the console to the lights, etc. I do have a follow-up question on the NDI versus SDI. Is there any sort of issue with color space from one versus the other? Like, are we worried about the color data matching?
I saw nothing in my 2 case uses. So I can't speak on it. Matt, is there any difference color-wise between the 2?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been working on various aspects of Mbox version 5. I've tried to make it better in that software. But the way that NDI works is it compresses the signal, number 1. So any amount of compression that's happening there may be over and above whatever the video signal already was. So if you're taking an SDI signal and then turning that into NDI, and it's getting compressed even further. NDI, depending on who is generating it, they make some assumptions about what the color space is. You know, it based on the spec, it gets above a certain resolution. It should assume back 709, it gets above an even bigger resolution. It may assume Rec 2020, and if it's below whatever, it may assume Rec 601.
Oh.
I have found that some of the quote unquote reference NDI apps that run on computers do a horrible job of receiving color that was sent, that was, you know, one value on one computer and then gets received on the other computer. The color is completely different. So I've done my best to make Mbox version 5 do a better job than those apps. I haven't really tested Mbox version 4 to see how well it does in comparison. But I'm trying to do the best job possible to make the color that when it came out of one device, then it shows up on the screen in Mbox as being the same color. I think, if I had to be honest, the Blackmagic stuff, given that it receives real video, and that it's a box of hardware that somebody has spent millions of dollars developing, probably is going to do a better job in the long run of keeping the right color than a piece of software where somebody might have read the spec wrong.
Yeah. I think that NDI is kind of a newer technology. So, I mean, it may come along. But man, I remember when it first came out, it was this magic that kind of started to happen. So it's cool. It'll be fun to see where it goes, but you know, it is newer.
What do you use it for? You said reference, taking it into the MA reference for
Yeah,
what?
so Random A3 allows NDI inputs of video, so I can just create a layout of a video input that's coming in through NDI. It's just a reference. I can't apply that onto my lights or anything, but I can see what remote is outputting without actually going over and looking at remote and touching it. You know, I can just see what the video is on there.
It's basically like the CITP, but he's doing it through
But-
NDI.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, and it's super cool. I can't wait to get into it. Like I just did the MA3 class, so I'm getting ready to jump into that. I'm really excited to see what
On 3 it is not.
on 3 now.
If they used NDI instead, that was their workaround.
But for the thumbnails, it's still.
But you don't get the thumbnails. That is the big downside.
Yeah,
You do have
Yeah,
to.
NDI, frankly, NDI is a much better tool for that than CITP is. CITP is pretty awful, to be honest.
yeah, it's funky.
The downside is that NDI requires an awful lot more bandwidth. And it's possibly gonna require more processing on the inbox side to send multiple streams to the lighting console.
Oh, okay, so this,
Just something to keep in mind.
yeah, so it might take performance away from the machine.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, copy.
Further questions in the room? I'm gonna ask 3 or 4 rapid fire things.
Sure.
And I'm gonna say, feel free to say, come to the class if you want to learn these, but I got quite a few little questions here that do feel to be stuff that you're gonna cover in the basic or 1-day, 2-day lab. So I'll throw a bunch of little topics out here. Hey, patching the Mbox can be challenging. Can you talk about the finer points of that? What are mixes? How do they work? Can you talk about layers and opacity in layer crossfades? You talk about using a layer to create a moving light. How do I access libraries and files? That's a whole lot there. And if you'd like me to do them one at a time.
So let's start at the top.
There is a little bit of a asking for some general basic info.
Sure. So let's talk console patching. Right, that was the first one.
Yeah.
Console patching.
Patching can
Really
be challenging was what I read.
patching can be challenging, and depending on the console that you use. So I won't even talk about 616 because there's 2 users of that in the room, and they're both. MA can be very challenging. Since I've moved into the MA world, in my we all have that kind of toolbox that we have patched to the layer that has all your fixtures that keep your color and everything. The way that I got around that is I have a whole nother layer patched with 676, with Mbox, all the layers in there. And I have parentheses on either side. On one side of the parentheses is the channel that I'm going to patch that at when I copy the layer. And then on the other side is the address that goes on. So if it's a 0, I know that it's the first address, 0.1, blah, blah, blah. So when I copy the layer in, I can just then manually type in all of my channel and DMX information and unpatched. That's my workaround in MA. In ETC, if you take the time, you can layer your fixtures together so you only have to patch one, which is a little closer to how 676 does it.
So the manual, which is excellent, has charts in there of
Mhm.
all the values and how many layers and how many outputs you want, lays it out nicely. And then when you go to configure Mbox, you configure it and it'll show you on the right panel of that configuration box what your start addresses will be. That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And you don't have to patch everything.
Yeah, one trick is we don't often patch the pro, or was it pro lights? Is that what the word is?
The lights, the
Oh, the
keystone,
font
stuff like that. Just
size.
if you're not going to use that function. Time out.
Because if you don't patch the keystone and the shutter, you may not get anything.
Yeah.
Oh, keystone, yes. So
Keystone shutter, yeah.
lights,
The pro lights are used to light 3D objects that then you want to throw into your media. So if you're not in that world of things,
Yeah.
we often just skip that in the hog world. Patch your master, you patch the number of outputs. I guess the trick is always the number of outputs you set in Mbox, make sure that's the number of outputs you patch in the console.
Yeah.
The number of layers you choose in Mbox, make sure that's the number of layers you choose. And in Mbox, in Studio, it lays out right there what
Yeah,
all
it
of the
shows the
patches are.
addresses and-
So the difficulty can be, are your profiles up to date that you're using? Do they match the actual version? Make sure your license match. If you pick Studio, make sure you're patching Studio, or not Studio. If you pick, I forget all the different versions. Mini,
Studio.
and Designer. Yeah, just make sure that they match. That's probably the trickiest part. But I would say the way you can do it the easiest is look at that window in the Mbox Studio and make sure it all just lines up.
Yep.
As far as the other questions, I think that's more in the class. Mixes
Yeah.
and
Okay,
stuff like
so
that.
if you are interested, please sign up for the class at 728 website.
Yep.
If you don't get in, I know that there's a wait list. Sign up anyways. You can always reach me at chris@lightscapelcp.com. You can reach Zac. You all know us. We can't promise anything, but we will advocate for more classes.
Yep.
We'll make our best attempt to film some videos. We're going to continue to grow. The idea of open source is we share this together. We figure it out together as a community. And all of this, aside from the class, which you were already developing, everything that's happening here today that happened with the class Ben taught, the seminar that Ben taught last week. All came from one of our members, thanks Silverback, came and say, hey, I got this Mbox. I don't know what to do with it. Can you help me out? I'm like, yeah. And I don't know what to do with it either. And I called Ben and I called Zac, and Ben, you said it earlier, we have a community. We have a group together, and we know how to help each other. John's been there before. Zac's been there before. James, Ben. Let's find this. This is a place to come together and share that. And that's all we're trying to do here is provide a clubhouse, a safe place for us all to come together. So call us. Don't call me. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I might know somebody who does. So I think that's a great segue to say thank you to the panel. Thank you, Matt. You guys have been wonderful.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for being here.
I hear there are some folks on Zoom and there's some folks in the room. What we're going to do now is we're going to kill the recording. For those of you in the Zoom, Matt, I don't know if you're down, but if you're in the Zoom and you want to hang out, talk to each other and do what we're going to do live, which is we're going to have some Portos, have a little drink and hang out and talk. So this is now the networking session. We'll keep the Zoom open, but this is the end of our formal thing. And I want to thank each of you for coming out, and especially Matt for coming all the way from New York. Thanks,
Thanks, Matt.
Matt.